Hello, my name is Tina Shrader. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and today I'm talking with you all, unfortunately, we're not in person, about crisis response, suicidal ideation, and other crisis concerns. So I'm thrilled to be with you all virtually. I'm wishing it was in person. When I did this talk with Dr. Kim Holz last year, I looked forward to it so much and was greatly looking forward to it this year and was very disappointed that COVID has gotten in the way of us being together in person this year for this discussion. But I'm hoping that this will still be helpful and informative, and we can do our best to connect virtually to follow up with any questions or concerns or clarifications that you all would like. So please do know that I was really looking forward to meeting you all in person and am equally looking forward to hearing from you as well. Um, so I have sent along a little worksheet for you to fill out and complete alongside listening to this lecture today. I have my notes here, so that's what I keep looking down at. So if you don't have those pulled up, feel free to. If you have a printer that's working, I would recommend printing it out, making some notes on it. There are some notes that I've added on here that aren't printed or typed up for you. So it might be beneficial for you. Just kind of stick it in all those papers that you keep that you'll pull out one day. I know I have this giant pack of papers that I still have from grad school that I'm like, oh man, I know this thing that I'm looking for, and it's in there somewhere, so I'll find it. And the notes do help, and I can remember what we were talking about. So feel free to take notes if you have a way to do that electronically. Do that as well. There are spaces left out that you can kind of fill in as we go. We'll try to bring your attention to those as we're working through the document here. So yeah, let's get started. Like I mentioned, my name is Tina Shrader. I'm a family therapist. I went to my undergrad degree at the University of Florida in psychology. I volunteered on the suicide hotline and was a teacher assistant for a psychology of suicide course. So that's really when I started to get interested in suicide, which is a very strange thing to say, I realize. I continued on with counseling and therapy at Adler University in the couples and family program there. My first job was with Pillars Community Health on the crisis SAS team, which gave me a great deal of um, knowledge and experience in working with various kinds of crises. So I'm hoping to bring some of that to you today. And I also worked in a school-based position there, handling crises and school-based services, supporting the staff at the school on how to manage crises with students as well. I now have a family therapy practice in Oak Park. I do home and office-based therapy for couples, teenagers, and their parents. I do a lot of parent coaching, parent work, and families in general. I will tell you, I have much less crisis come up on my caseload now than ever before. But it is equally as important, and I'm incredibly I find my background in crisis incredibly valuable in every interaction that I have, any non-crisis interaction with my outpatient caseload. It helps me significantly, I think, with traditional outpatient therapy. There is not always that crisis background. Not a lot of therapists have it, is what I mean. So families, that are looking for a therapist for their teenager who was recently attempted suicide or was inpatient or was at a residential program, they can't they usually don't feel comfortable going to just any therapist that doesn't have that experience. And we will talk about why, but if you can guess, it's because of their comfort level with crises. So it's important to have a higher tolerance for crises and for these things so that your clients can feel that they can trust you with the things that are going on with them. Let's see. So today we will be talking about suicide. The conversation might be triggering for some of you, and it's going to be difficult to think through and process. If you have a history with suicide and within yourself or with a loved one or a client, even if you need to go ahead and pause the video and take breaks, please feel free to do so. If we were in person, I would tell you you're welcome to step out of the room as needed. Reach out, take care of yourself during this conversation because sometimes things will come up that you're not expecting. So feel free to, please do what you need to take care of yourself during our talk today. So in talking about suicide, I'm well aware that some of you may use this information differently in your careers going forward. Some of you might use this information on how to assess for suicide and for crises weekly. Some might use it every day. Some may never use it. But like CPR, it's important to have the knowledge because you never know when you're going to use it. And usually in the moments that you need it is when you are the most flustered and the most nervous, and it's the hardest to recall the information. So being comfortable with this information now is important in being able to perform at your best and take care of yourself and your clients at your best when it's needed. What I've learned about crises, and I've learned a lot of things, but one of them that's the most important is that the stress of the situation is the most impactful. And your first line here is being prepared is the best way to address that. So a lot of the times when I was working in the high school and something would come up, a student might express that they're having thoughts of wanting to harm themselves or they've been having a suicidal thought. There would be a very big reaction from the staff there as they weren't familiar or comfortable with hearing these things as a regular part of their day. It's difficult for the clients then because a lot of the times the clients, when they're sharing with us their thoughts, their concerns, they've maybe been thinking about this for a long time and haven't been sure who to tell, who they can trust. So when they finally open up that they are having these thoughts and the reaction that they get from a trained clinician is panic and not knowing what to do and a lot of the time an overreaction, it doesn't set the client up for the best response going forward. It definitely impacts their ability to trust that provider, the school, the staff, all the other systems. So we want to be sure that we are appropriately reacting to the situation at hand. I'm not saying to downplay it, but we definitely don't want to be the ones that are the most in crisis when we're dealing with crises. Is really the takeaway here. So we want to be sure that that we know that you are going in with tools, with support, and that you, even if you know that this is not a population that you're called to support, like those in crisis, if you know already watching this, like before we've even started, you're like, I know I don't want to have to use these skills. That's okay. The important thing to know is that you may need to, and it's going to be really important for you to have at least somewhat of a baseline going in. So even if you think you'll never need it, even if you know you don't want to ever use it, you will still need it. Another point that I want to make is today we will be talking about risk in general. Most often I'm going to refer specifically to suicide, but please know that what I do mean is risk in general. If we have too narrow of a focus of what risk is, we might miss other things that are in play, right? So we might miss other possibilities such as homicidal thoughts, changes in medication that might be impacting ideations, medical issues, psychosis, other risky behaviors, daredevil type behaviors, sexually acting out, risky sexual behaviors, using or abusing substances. So all of these things really play into what we consider to be risk assessment. Most often we're talking about suicide assessment, but if we keep that as our go-to, we're missing the larger scope of really what we're assessing for. So just keep in mind as I'm referring to suicide, I'm also talking about all these other risk factors as well. It's important too to keep all of these things on your radar at all times. A lot of the times, we think like, oh, I've never had a client that has had real homicidal ideation. Like that's not a real thing. That's not in my population. The reality is that the minute we start thinking that, we are playing into allowing that to be a topic that is too taboo for our clients to bring to us. And what we really want to avoid is having this like shocked reaction when our clients are opening up to us. So we want to make sure that we're trying to keep all of these risk concerns on our radar at all times, on our kind of dashboard. Even if we're not using them, we're not forgetting about them and the possibility that they could be at play with a presenting issue at the moment. Your second line here is to not only that we keep these things in mind, not only to keep our clients safe, but also for your own professional liability. That is your next kind of fill in the blank here. This is something I'm going to go back to a few different times in our talk today. It is really important. And I know a lot of us start in this career because we're here to help other people. And we're here to keep our clients safe and to make sure that their safety is our number one priority. In addition, we can't forget that this is our own professional liability as well. If we refuse to learn these skills, if we refuse to acknowledge that risk is a ever-present part of every population, we're not only doing our clients a disservice, but we're also impacting our own liability. So I know you all want to be great therapists and you will be great therapists. And it's really important that you understand how to keep yourself safe as you're keeping other people safe as well. So we'll talk about how to keep yourself safe as you're working with these crises. Y'all, my notes are everywhere. I should have retyped this. Okay, so the next thing is that we're going to discuss the importance of addressing your own thoughts, your own feelings, and your own reactions. So as I mentioned, what we want to avoid is our clients coming to us and trusting us with these thoughts that they've been keeping secret for whoever knows how long. And for our reaction, what we don't want is to be like, you're what? Like, no, you don't want to do that. Like, you just got a new job. Like, right? Like, that's the reaction we don't want to have. We don't want shock factor. We don't want our facial expressions to give them the reaction of like, oh man, like, I thought I could trust my therapist with this, and it turns out I can't. And now I regret bringing it up. And these are the thoughts we don't want our clients to have. It's important that we are addressing our own biases, our own experiences, our own personal reactions to suicide and these other crisis points in general. So if we have personal experience with suicide, it's important that we're exploring those before we start working with clients, because in the moment, it's going to be too late. If we need to have ourselves in check as therapists before we're getting into the therapy room. The most important thing that I want to leave with you all today is an activity. If we were in person today, I would have you all pair up and do this activity together, but we are not. So what I do want you to do is spend some time working on this activity, either with someone in your home that you are sheltered in place with, someone from your class that maybe you can jump on a Zoom call with, but it's really important that you do this exercise. Just gonna say it. So the activity is, I want you to practice how it feels to ask someone if they're having thoughts of wanting to hurt themselves. I want you to practice asking someone if they're having thoughts of wanting to kill themselves. They're having thoughts of wanting to harm someone else. These risk questions that we are going to be talking about today, I want you to practice asking those in a situation that you can 99% know that the answer is going to be no. What this does is that it just the routine of asking this, the action of asking these questions for the first time and seeing someone's reaction, you're going to get feedback within yourself about what's coming up for you, how it feels to get the words out, how you think it sounds, and then you're going to ask the person that you ask how it felt for them. How was your tone? How was your eye contact? How was the wording? These kinds of things. How did they feel? If they were really feeling that way, would they have felt comfortable following up or not? So pair up with someone either in your house or over Zoom in your class or someone else, and go ahead and ask them some of these questions. I want you then to reflect on how it felt for you, and how it felt for them. If you would like, you can have them cue it up by saying something like they can start and say, I've been having a really tough time lately. And then your response would be, are you having any thoughts of wanting to harm yourself? Have you had any thoughts of wanting to die? Have you had any thoughts of wanting to end your life? Practice with a few of those, and you'll find which one feels most comfortable for you. The answer is none of them will feel comfortable probably, but which feels the least uncomfortable. If you want to pause this and do that now, feel free. If you want to do it at the end of our talk today, you could do that as well. I'm going to grab my water while you maybe pause. Okay. So much talking. So I want you all to know that when I was in my position of asking this question 5 times a week, it does not get easier, but it does get more comfortable. It's still difficult for me to ask these questions. Even like recording it now, it's still difficult to get those words out. Oftentimes I'm scared of what answer I will get, but I've never regretted asking. It's important that you're practicing getting these difficult questions out because they need to be asked. Let's move on. We're going to chat about warning signs. So in situations where you know the client well, maybe they are a client of yours, you've been seeing them, these are some things that could be warning signs. A change in affect, either from a low affect to a higher affect, or a higher affect to a lower affect from week to week, maybe between your sessions. If they're getting rid of items, this could be a warning sign. I've never seen this one, but I think it's a little outdated. Maybe it still exists for more of an adult population. If they're isolating or making an effort to connect with friends, so kind of either end of that spectrum could be a warning sign. Being focused on the topic of death or the afterlife, an increase in life stressors, a recent trauma or traumatic loss, or a decrease in tolerance or perceived tolerance for whatever stressors are going on. So say they maybe have a difficult medical diagnosis. They recently got diagnosed with cancer, let's say. And when they first received the diagnosis, they were feeling confident about it. They were feeling like, yeah, I can battle this. If 1 week they come in and they've lost that and they're saying, I don't have this same drive, this same motivation, that could be a warning sign. So that decrease in tolerance or their perception or motivation for the tolerance of that stressor. It's important to keep in mind that everyone responds differently to triggering events. What may seem devastating to you might not be for a client. What might seem devastating for a client might not be for you. You might have been listening and spending hours on end with this client talking about their terrible boyfriend for months, and then they finally break up, and you're like, yeah, you got that out of your life. And they are saying that they want to end their life. And you might be like, why? This is the best thing that's ever happened to you. So it's critical to keep in mind that your tolerance for situations can and probably will be drastically different than that of your clients. So keeping an understanding of their tolerance, their baseline, rather than comparing it to your own. Warning signs aside, there's one thing that you need to do to give your best effort, and that is to ask. You need to be asking all of the questions. You need to be always asking these questions and being sure that you're not keeping any of those things in out of fear. So you're probably thinking, when should I assess for safety? The answer is, if you have any doubt in your mind that this person is going to be able to be safe, the best case scenario will be they're going to say, oh my gosh, no, I'm not thinking that. Like, why would you say that? I had one little boy tell me one time when I asked him if he was having thoughts of wanting to hurt himself, he said, why would you ask a kid that? And I was like, great, like that's the best case scenario. Like, let's move on. You still have to ask, even if you are 99.999% sure that's the answer you're going to get. Until you ask, you are not sure. And for your own liability, you need to ask. I still fight myself on this all the time. I get this, it's like a gut instinct. Really, it's like a gut question. It's that like 0.0001% that's like, oh, should I ask? You always have to. This is something that you'll learn is if there is any question in your mind, you have to ask. When I was working at Pillars Community Health in the agency, we would have like an open office, and someone would come in, to my office and be like, "Hey, I wanted to run this by you. I just saw this client, and this thing came up." And they'd share a little bit, and they're like, "What do you think? Like, should I call DCFS on this situation?" And I was like, "If you're in my office and you're asking, you need to call. Like, if there's any question in your mind, you need to call." It's the same with assessing for safety. If there's any question in your mind, just ask the question. What's keeping you from asking is that fear of asking. And that's why this activity is really important, because we don't want our shit to be getting in the way of our clients getting the best care that they need. So, we need to regularly assess for safety with clients who especially have a history of crisis concerns. With any of the crisis concerns, your next fill in the blank here is to assess regularly and document always, right? So this is another point where it's not only for their safety, but it's for your own liability. When you're assessing for safety, part of that is to be checking in with them just to make sure that everything's good, they're not having other thoughts. The second part of that is so that you can document to say that you did. Very important for your own safety as a clinician. The other reason we want to always be asking these questions is we want to communicate to our clients that we're in tune with them, right? That no topic is too taboo for us. So if they're talking about their breakup and we're like, wow, that sounds like it's kind of bad. So have you been having thoughts of wanting to hurt yourself since then? I mean, are you feeling like your loneliness and your hopelessness has gotten to the point of wanting to die? That shows that we're in tune with them. It shows that we're not scared to take it that step further. That if that's really where they're at and they're not ready to take it there with us yet, or they don't know if it's safe, we communicate in that moment. This is a safe place. This is a safe conversation for us to have. If we don't, they might be hinting at it, and we might miss the cue or not want to accept that that's the cue. And that's a not good thing to do. So now that we've talked about deciding when to assess, you're probably wondering how. So let's talk about assessment tools. There are a lot of different kinds of assessment tools. The main things that every assessment tool should have is that breaking down the things that you're assessing for. Okay, so we're assessing for suicidal ideation, homicidal ideation, psychosis, and other risky behaviors. The steps of an assessment. I'm going to break this down into a few different situations. So if this is a client of yours that you've been meeting with, the first few things we're going to talk about, you can skip ahead because you've already done this. If this is a new client, if this is a crisis situation you are being called to, if this is someone maybe you're on the phone with, you're going to want to be sure to be gathering information from whoever has referred this person to you. So if it's a teenager, you're going to want to gather information from their parent, their teacher, a friend, like whoever has brought them in with concern. You want to take those concerns with a grain of salt. You want to go in with that knowledge, but also have an open mind to gather some information from the client as well. You want to build rapport with that client, gathering demographic information from them, and building rapport is key in crisis assessment. They're trusting you, right? Like they're this person that you've never met before, and they're going to tell you the scariest thing that they haven't told the person closest to them yet. They're going to trust you. So building rapport is key. If you're not in person with the client, if you're over the phone, if you're virtual, it's important to figure out where the client is, their address, like where they are right now. This is because if later down the road in your conversation, they get scared, then they might hang up. And if you are just talking about ways they can keep themselves safe and you're not sure they can keep themselves safe, you're going to be in a real shitty situation when you're super worried about this client's safety and they've hung up on you and they're not answering the phone, right? So one of the first things that you need to do while you're in the good graces with them and they're warmed up and you're building rapport is find out exactly where they are so that if they do hang up, you can contact the police. Assessing. So if this is a new client to you, you're going to start with gathering that information, and then in your real assessment is going to start from assessing their baseline functioning. So we want to figure out their functioning baseline, so kind of what it is normally in areas of school, work, family, social relationships, romantic relationships, their financial status, hygiene, sleep and eating routines, medication management, hobbies, routines, all of these things. We want to, do what we can to get a clear picture of them at their baseline. Then we want to assess for medical issues, any medications prescribed, especially we want to discuss like compliance, whether they're taking their medications, whether they're taking them regularly, whether they're taking them as prescribed. We want to assess for the baseline mood and emotions. Is this someone who is typically very emotional? Are they typically presenting with such a flat tone or affect on the phone because that's their baseline, or is that the crisis situation that we're dealing with right now? So getting an idea of kind of the differences in them at their baseline and the way they're presenting right now. Assess for recent changes in baseline. This is where you're going to jump in if this is your client, right? So if this is your client, you already should know their baseline functioning. You've been meeting with them for maybe several weeks now. You're now going to be assessing for their changes in baseline. If this is your client, they're probably going to be more open and honest with you because you have a relationship with them. This conversation, though, is something that they may have been holding back. They might have been waiting to build that trust with you. So don't be surprised if you've been meeting with someone for 6 sessions and they come in and just this first, just disclose to you that they've been having these thoughts. And you're like, we've been meeting all this time. They have finally warmed up to you. They finally trusted you with these thoughts. So it's important to assess for, is this a new crisis? Is this a change in baseline since last week? Or is this that, you're just feeling comfortable sharing with this information with me now? That's important to assess for. So your next line here, the one before was assessed for baseline functioning. This one is assessed for recent changes in the baseline. And then you're going to be assessing for risk factors. So you're going to be asking questions specifically related to suicidal ideation, homicidal ideation, psychosis, and other risky behaviors. The questions might be, are you having any thoughts of wanting to hurt yourself? Have you had any thoughts of wanting to end your life? Are you having any thoughts of wanting to hurt someone else, hurt or kill someone else? Have you been hearing or seeing anything that you think other people don't hear or see? Other risky behaviors, have you been drinking alcohol, using drugs? Have you increased that? It really depends who you're talking to. If you're talking to a child, you probably aren't going to ask those questions, and you're probably going to tailor your questions to a child about suicide that you would to an adult. Keep in mind that you can ask a first question and then follow-up questions. So you can say, like, it seems like things with this breakup have gotten really bad. You're reporting you're feeling really helpless. Have you been having thoughts of wanting to hurt yourself? And then they might say, yeah, I've been having some of those thoughts. Then you can kind of tailor it down rather than asking the very specific question first and then being like, oh, okay. You can kind of narrow it down as you go. It's critical that you're asking all of these questions, right? So you might say like, oh, someone with this breakup, they're not having suicide, they're not having psychosis. You cannot assume that they're not having psychosis. It could be that they're having psychosis and that's why their partner broke up with them, right? Like it's very important. I know I'm saying that a lot. There's so many things that are very important about this, that you are asking all of these questions. Best case scenario, they're going to be like, why are you asking me this? Like, no. Why would you think that I'm hearing people? You think I'm seeing things? You think I'm going crazy? That is the best case scenario. And you're like, no, I just have to ask. Like, I have to be sure. If I don't ask, then I don't know. Really, if you don't ask, you don't know. You can't assume. When you're assessing for these risk factors, you want to assess for present and past. So you want to talk about thoughts. Are you having thoughts of wanting to hurt yourself, right? How often are you having these thoughts? See how we're kind of boiling it down, getting more information, getting more specific. How often? How strong are these thoughts? How disruptive are they? Are you able to go about your day and focus at school or at work? How much are they impacting you? Your ideation, that would be next. If they say they are having thoughts, you ask about their ideation. What's their goal? What do they want? What are they thinking, right? So yeah, they're having thoughts. Okay, what kind of thoughts are you having? What do they want to escape? What do they want to end? Do they really want their life to end? Do they want this stage of their life to be over? The term passive ideation, you'll hear a lot, and it's a good one to keep in mind. And it really helps you be the clinician that cannot be the one most in crisis, right? If your client reports like, yeah, I have thoughts of wanting to end my life every day, that's a really scary thing to hear. But that might be their baseline. They might have frequent thoughts of what it would be like if their life was over, right? This might be just, like I said, their baseline. This might be a frequent thought that passes their mind. It might be a place that they go, a place that their thoughts end up, that they don't feel they have that much control over. So there are clients who have frequent, consistent, passive suicidal ideation that they never act upon, that they never feel gets out of hand or gets out of control, or they never have a plan. Maybe it's someone who has had a history of an attempt, and so it's hard for them to not think about that, the thought of wanting to do that, but they never have a plan to do that. The next thing you're going to ask about is intent. Do they really want to do it? Do you really want to kill that person, your neighbor? Or is it something you just kind of fantasize or think about? Do you really think you would do it? Are they afraid to do it? Do they have any religious views that would get in the way of that? Those are what we call protective factors. And then as we get closer, as we kind of get more information about this, we're going to talk about their plan. Do you have a plan of how you would kill your neighbor, how you would kill yourself? We explore their plan. We explore the means, so what they would use to execute that plan. We would ask, are their means accessible? Is this situation occurring regularly? So if we're sitting with a client who's having thoughts of wanting to kill themselves and it's worse in the morning and after work, and the trigger is that their boss berates them constantly, maybe they're having thoughts of wanting to jump in front of the train. So we're going to ask, do you take the train? Yeah, I take the train to and from work every day. That's concerning, right? They have access to the means to complete their plan. Also, that's a very risky plan. The means are immediate rather than having to go and obtain a gun or something like that. Something impulsive like jumping in front of a train is a much riskier plan. So that's something else we want to explore. How risky is their plan? I once had a child that I was assessing for tell me they wanted to die by crying themselves to sleep. So that plan is very low risk. In my mind, I'm like, yeah, you can't do that. But it's still important that we are fully taking that seriously because that impulsivity could easily jump to grabbing a knife off the kitchen counter for that child, right? So we need to be asking a lot of different questions of even if this plan doesn't seem risky, how impulsive are they to act on this intention, on this ideation? Because the plan could change at any moment. Someone who wants to overdose on their medications, we would ask, how much medication do you keep on hand at home? You want to ask a lot of questions. So this is the time to get super creative in asking lots of questions. Who monitors your medications? How many do you have right now? How many do you think it would take to kill yourself? Would someone else be home? When are other people not home? When are people in your home there or not there? How long would you be left alone? So when you're asking these questions, it's also an opportunity that you can watch your client think these things through. So if they have like rapid fire answers, if you're asking these questions and you're talking to a teenager and they're like, oh yeah, well on Tuesdays, I know both my mom works late and my dad has guys' night with his friends, and my sister's usually at baseball practice. So I don't know, why his sister would be playing baseball, but so I know that I am home alone on Tuesdays until 8 o'clock at night. And I know that my mom just told me that she's picking up a new medication refill for me. So I would just take the whole bottle, right? Like if they're answering like that, you can tell that they've really thought this through rather than like, sometimes my parents go out on a date on Friday night. Sometimes my sister's in the other room and she's ignoring me. So maybe then, I don't know. I don't know how many pills I have, maybe like a few, but my mom keeps them in her room and, they're up high and she counts them. So those are the things that you're like, oh, okay. Like he's thought about it, but not as risky as the first case scenario. Ask all the questions. You're assessing their risk of safety to be alone, but also your liability. That's why you're asking so many questions. You're assessing whether you think this person is safe to be at home, or if we can say, you know what, like, let's put some other things in place and they can be safe, or no, they can't be. Once again, ask all of the questions. They might be saying all of this out loud for the first time. And so it's important to show them that you're not afraid to be walking down that process, that thought process with them, that you're not afraid. That's a very important thing that we're conveying to our clients, that you are a safe person for them to be expressing these thoughts and feelings to. Okay, the next thing that we're going to be assessing for is attempts. How close have you gotten to attempting your plan? Have you had any attempts of wanting to harm yourself in the past? Have you had any attempts of wanting to harm someone else in the past? So if this person that you're talking to might want to hurt their neighbor, you're not only going to want to know if they've had any thoughts of wanting to attempt to hurt their neighbor in the past, but other people. Have they been physically violent with other people? These kinds of things to get a clearer picture on not only the situation between them and their neighbor, but their impulsivity as a whole. The biggest predictor of future attempts is past attempts, having attempted in the past. That's your next line there. Oh, the one above was ask all the questions. I don't know if I made that one clear enough. So the biggest predictor of future attempts is having attempted in the past. How risky are they? What was the precipitating event? How planned was it? How impulsive was it? You can and should ask them, like, how are you still alive? Why are you sitting here with me now? Was it your intention to have a failed attempt? Was it not your plan to have a failed attempt? How do they feel about their failed attempt? How do they think about it, talking about it today? Do they say, like, I failed, I didn't do it right, I needed more time, I needed more pills? Or are they like, I'm so, glad, relieved it didn't work? That gives a lot of information as well. Next, you want to discuss their strengths, their support system, and their plans for the future. These are things that we call protective factors. It's important to not only assess for the risk, but also the protective factors. We want to find out if they're engaged with services, if they have a therapist or a counselor, if they have someone at school that they trust, what their support system is like. Do they have parents that they can talk to? Do they have a boyfriend or girlfriend that they can talk to, a spouse, friends, neighbors, all of these things? And when are they being seen again by the providers that they have in their support system? This is huge in determining a disposition. Honestly, this can be the deciding factor between someone who's kind of on the edge. So if I'm sitting with I usually sit with teenagers, right? So teenager, and they had recently had a medication change. It seems like they're having more depression because of this medication change. They've had some passive thoughts of wanting to harm themselves. They have not a completely solid plan, but the means are somewhat accessible, somewhat risky. It's hard to know if this plan could formulate quickly when they leave my office. If they have no therapy, that's a concern, right? Like, I don't know how quickly I can get them in to see a therapist, get them connected, and build that rapport to have someone that's going to check in with them regularly. If they have an appointment with their therapist tomorrow, I feel much more confident that we can connect with their therapist, let them know our concerns, and that they are going to be supported. So, having a clear idea of the support systems and the services that they have in place right now will help you make a disposition. The disposition is your decision. What are they hoping to happen after this meeting? Are they hoping to go to the hospital because they feel scared? Are they hoping to get a therapist that they can connect with? That's an important question to ask. And we want to provide that if it seems like it's the safest and most realistic option for them. Why are they sharing this with you? Or why did they share this with the person that shared it with you? What about the other people around them in their life? Like, have you told mom who's sitting in the waiting room? Like, why haven't you told her? Asking questions about, like, have you told any of your friends? These kinds of things will help you understand the services they have in place and their risk. You want to ask yourself some questions too. How are you feeling? How are you feeling about sitting with this person? How are you feeling about their level of risk, about their level of being able to keep themselves safe? Do you feel comfortable with this person going home and being able to keep themselves safe? That's the ultimate question right there. If you let this person go home, do you think that they're going to be able to keep themselves and other people safe? Not are you afraid? Not are you afraid they could, but do you really think clinically, in your best judgment, what is the best place for this person to be? So you have a few options. The first would be the lowest tier, I guess, and that would be a safety plan. These are for clients that you can. Oh, I missed a very important part. You have to consult. We're going to talk about consulting, so we'll just hold off on that. A safety plan is for clients that you believe can keep themselves safe, and they can agree, they have to agree to keep themselves safe, and you believe them. We cannot safety plan with a client that doesn't know we're safety planning with them. A safety plan is a document that is them agreeing to keep themselves safe. These clients should have strong protective factors, and they should have a solid support system. You want to create a safety plan document with them. You want to give them one to take home, and you want to keep one that they have signed for your own liability. You want to make sure that they know who they are following up with and when. If you feel the need, you can connect with that person with their permission. Call their therapist and confirm that appointment. What we don't want to happen is to say this. Oh, you have an appointment with your therapist tomorrow. Great. Why don't you talk to them about it? And then they go home and they cancel it, right? Like we want to connect with that therapist. We don't want loose ends. So calling that therapist, getting their email, sending them an email, making sure you're connecting those dots. That the client has agreed on the plan, that they've signed, and that they are linked with services that are needed. The next option would be hospitalization. This would be the most severe, I guess you could call it, disposition. So these are for clients that are unsure that they can keep themselves safe, or you are unsure that they can keep themselves safe, or you know that they cannot. They might want to keep themselves safe, but they have access to a plan. They might really not want to go to the hospital. But if you're not sure they can keep themselves safe, then that's where they need to be. To get someone hospitalized, I'm going to talk just a little bit about this because if you're in a position that you would be hospitalizing someone, you're going to be trained on this. In the state of Illinois, you need to complete a petition to admit someone against their will, meaning that you as a professional are saying this person is at risk enough that they don't get to say, no, I don't want to, that they need to. And then you need to complete a petition, which is a document stating that they need to be admitted. It's for adults only, over 18. You can Google it. It is Googleable, Illinois petition. I have one handy, printed out like a blank one. And this is just for your own sake, do this. I have a cheat sheet copy that's like filled out with John Doe, and it tells me like, if it's this situation, check this box. If it's this situation, check this box. If there's a police present, fill this out, right? Like it's partially filled out and it gives me all the cheat sheet answers. I still use it. And I am so thankful every time that I use it because when I have to fill out a petition, I am not at my best. I've usually gone through a difficult assessment with an adult. They're not willing to go, so I have to admit them, which sucks. And I don't do them regularly enough to remember. And so it's always good to not have to second guess myself. And I can just be like, thank you, past self for looking out for future self me, like that. So do yourself a favor and have one of those handy. You want to think about what it is that you're hoping to accomplish with hospitalization. With this is a great time to consult. So you need to be reaching out to your supervisor, your on-call buddy, your colleague, your coworker, whoever it is that you're supposed to be consulting with, and think about what it is that you're hoping to accomplish. Hospitalization, an inpatient unit, is good for accomplishing a few things. It's good for having a safe place for a person that they are unable to harm themselves or others. That's number one, most important. Number two, it's a safe place to do a medication change. So if they're having symptoms of medication and we're thinking like, oh, we need to change it, it's a safe place where they can be monitored to change in case there's any symptoms or side effects that might come up. It is not a great place to address placement issues, conflicts, relational conflicts. Placement issues meaning like if you're working with a kid in foster care or who's living with their aunt and uncle or is fighting with their parents, they're going to be admitted for a week maybe, and they're going to come right back to the same situation. If they need to be in a safe place, that's a great place for them. But be clear that when they come out, like what is it that they're coming back out to, right? If they're suicidal because they've lost their job and they have no money, they're going to be admitted and they're going to be in a safe place. They might get medication, they might be stabilized, but be very clear, like when you come out, these stressors are still going to be very present for you. So what is it that we're doing to address those in addition to getting them a safe place? There's also some partial hospitalization programs. They mirror school time hours for younger kids. They also have them in the evening hours for adults. These are called partial hospitalization programs. They do depend on insurance. It's something to keep in mind for kind of those on the fence clients. If you feel like they need some immediate support or treatment or more intensive than an outpatient therapist, sometimes they do have wait lists. So just once you figure out where you'll be working, who you'll be working with, what population, it's good to have an idea of which hospitals nearby have those programs that you could refer to. Never leave a client without a disposition, ever. That's like the worst thing. Well, there's a lot of terrible things you do, but that's a really bad thing to do. Hospitalization or assigned safety plan, other steps, other agreements. It's important to trust the client, but don't trust them too much. They're going to do what they say. A lot of the times they really want to just leave. They don't want to be talking to you anymore. They might regret what they said and they're going to tell you whatever they want to get out of there. Make sure that you have all the loose ends tied up, that you've connected with the therapist, that you've walked them into the ER and connected their hand with a nurse. We don't want to trust these clients too much because they are in crisis and they are in somewhat of a survival mode. That is for your own liability to make sure that you are connecting those dots. Have an accessible list of crisis resources in the area that you're working that you can refer to. These crisis moments when you're going to need this stuff, you're not going to be at your best. You're not going to be thinking clearly. It's going to be your last client after a long day, and you're going to have plans with your partner to have a great dinner, and you're going to be like, shit, I can't come right now because I have to do a crisis assessment. And you're going to want as many cheat sheets and supports as you have. Things to keep in mind when you're assessing. Like water, is that you want to consult. Oh, my paper still. You want to consult, but before you consult, you want to be sure that you've gathered enough necessary information. This is the biggest rookie mistake that I see and that I've made myself personally. When you consult, you're going to call your supervisor, you're going to call your coworker, and you're going to say, oh, I'm on the fence about this one. Can I talk it through with you? You're going to give them the information you have. What's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to ask you questions that you haven't thought of or that you have thought of. They're going to ask you questions. And if you're like, oh, I didn't ask. Oh, I haven't thought of, oh, I didn't know that I should ask. They're going to be like, get your butt back in there and ask all your questions, right? Ask all the questions, gather all the information before you consult. there will be more questions that you forgot to ask, but you can definitely get the basic stuff first. Many times when you're assessing for safety, you're going to need to break confidentiality. And breaking confidentiality with youth, you want to explain that the importance of confidentiality, but even above that is the importance of safety. That's our number one. And talking about its limitations. You want to be talking about that in your first session with every client, just because it's very important for them to know that it is a confidential relationship, but even more than that, you have a higher calling to keeping them safe other than keeping their information confidential. The way I usually explain breaking confidentiality with youth is it's my responsibility to keep you safe. And some of the things that you're sharing with me have me worried about you. Remember when we discussed confidentiality and how you report thoughts of wanting to harm yourself? I have to share that with your parents so that they can assist us in getting you the help that you need to keep yourself safe. Most of the time, people aren't shocked by that. They've thought about that before they've opened their mouth. Okay, as we're getting close on our time, I wanted to share a little bit with you all about SAS. SAS stands for Screening, Assessment, and Support Services. It was only eligible for youth with the medical card or state-funded insurance, or those who were unfunded, so had no insurance. It is now, excitingly enough, open for adults as well with the medical card, state-funded insurance, and uninsured, I believe. And it's called the Crisis Response Team or something along those lines. It's always good to just call and see if you have a question. They're changing a lot of these things. The state is, and along with COVID and all this other stuff, try not to just like block it out. The next part of what I want to talk about is there's the clinical of what we do to assess for safety, all the questions, all the assessing, all the supporting our clients, building rapport, covering our own liability. And then there's like the way we're actually going about doing it and making it billable, legal, financial. Like this is the really important part. This will get figured out, right? If you don't know how to do this, this doesn't matter. Once you do this right, this will get figured out. So definitely more important. So SAS will provide on-site risk assessments and placements in homes, schools, therapy offices, hospitals. If you're with a client if you're with a teenager who has state-funded insurance and you think that they might be at risk, you can call someone to come to your office to do an assessment and determine and place them. Every agency operates differently, so the state contracts out these services to agencies across the state to provide the supports to kind of dispatch those services. Every agency operates differently. Find out what agency covers the area that you'll be working in and get to know them, find out what their protocols are, get familiar with the services if you think that this is a population that you'll be encountering. For private insurance clients, which I'm assuming most of you all have at least for the long term of your career, you're going to want to contact a local crisis line or team or consult for support. So these agencies that provide the SAS services, they often also provide a crisis line. That's good to keep in mind because you can just reach out to them, speak to the crisis worker, and they can help you determine what the best course of action would be. They can be another person that you can consult with. They're going to have much more up-to-date information on crisis services available in the area. So a good support to keep in your back pocket that's available for you. If you determine that someone with private insurance needs to be hospitalized, it's your responsibility to send them to the nearest ER to keep them in a safe place. That will cover your liability most if you send them in an ambulance, if you follow them, if you get something signed with their intent or agreement. Let's see. So, questions. I wish we were in person and you could raise your hands and we could talk about this stuff. Last year when I kind of presented this to the other class, I was trying to remember they had a lot of questions about insurance and billing, payment, um, and I tried to answer some of them. And then at some point I was like, here's the answer. Clinically, you need to know what the fuck to do. That's the most important part. The insurance part will come after. Um, Clinical first, always. Like crisis takes precedent. If your client's not alive, we don't work, like billing is not an issue. It's important to not be scared. That's really important. Know what a real crisis is. Don't be that clinician that's overreacting or is in crisis themselves and reacting from that place. If it is necessary to call an ambulance and for your client to have that really high ambulance bill, then it is necessary to keep their life safe. And you should be able to fully sit in that decision and say, that was the necessary decision to keep the client safe. And I was covering my own liability, right? It's expensive. And so we don't want to do it unless it's totally necessary. But the cost of an ambulance is nothing compared to the cost of someone's life and safety. Um, Also, you can use a crisis line to consult as needed always. That's something great to keep in mind that I think a lot of people don't think about. You know, when we see these suicide hotlines, these local crisis lines, we assume like, oh, we'll just give that to our clients and they will use that. It's also a great resource for us that those crisis workers can help us help our clients through those situations. And they should be. They usually are very happy to do so. And I hope that you all will send me other questions that you have. I really am disappointed that we can't be in person because this was something I was really looking forward to and answering the questions that you have. I'm gonna send along my email, my how you can get a hold of me if there's a time that you all are Zoom discussing this call and I'm able to hop on. I'd love to field any of your questions from there. Please do reach out. I really hope to answer questions about this, answer questions about having a therapy practice in general, having a therapy practice during COVID, whatever thoughts or questions you have, I would love to get them. I'm stuck at home with my family, so I'm hoping to be of support to you. It's something I really was looking forward to. Um, I have a few things that might be helpful for you as homework and that can help you in the long run. I'm a big fan of doing things now for your future self that you'll be very happy that you did while you have the time in school. Not that there's a lot of time, but while it's on your mind and it's fresh. The first is to Google, Pinterest, ask colleagues. You can ask me and create a crisis assessment and safety plan that you are confident and comfortable with. Not all of the placements that you'll have for your internships or for your first jobs will provide these, right? So it is not their responsibility to provide that for you because it is still your liability to be doing this. So have a document that you feel comfortable with. Even if you find it online and you're like, yeah, this is straightforward, it's clear, it's concise, I'm familiar with it, I can feel confident using it on like the worst case scenario day. The important piece is having something that you feel comfortable, confident, you can go to document. Document, document, document. Document it all. Document how long it took you to document it. That is really where your own liability will come into play and keeping yourself as a clinician safe in addition to keeping your clients safe. So find some of those good documents, kind of push them together and find something that works for you. If you are a good therapist, which you will be, you will all be good therapists and you all want to be good therapists, you have to trust that your clients will trust you, that they will be reaching out to you, sharing these thoughts with you. you being the one person that they trust to share these deep, dark thoughts they haven't shared with anyone else. You have to prepare yourself if you're going to be good at what you do to be good at what you do. And that means that people are going to trust you with the stuff they don't trust others with. And you have to be prepared to hold that. That's what this is about, is being prepared for the worst and being able to respond effectively and not being more in crisis than them. It's very important. I'm not going to say it anymore. The second piece of homework is to find a list of crisis resources in your area. Therapists, psychiatrists, psychiatric hospitals, crisis lines. If once you start an internship, a job, make sure that you get that. Sometimes that will be something that they give you. Sometimes that'll be something that you will accumulate as you go. Sometimes the person at the desk next to you already has one and it's up on their bulletin board and they're going to be more than happy to give it to you. But that's something that you will refer to and go back to, and it will really help you out when you're trying to get these clients connected with supports. That's the end of my notes. Just over an hour, not bad. I'm really wishing we were in person. I know I've said that a lot, but I do. And I hope that you feel comfortable reaching out. I hope to get a bunch of emails from you all and to connect with you, answer any questions that you have about whatever, about crisis, suicide, therapy practice, private insurance. I don't know if I have the answers, but I'll try. And anything else, I'm excited for you all. I know that doing your graduate program over electronic learning was not in the plans, but you'll be great therapists because of it. So yeah, please do reach out, and I look forward to hearing from you. And good luck on the rest of your program. Thanks.